introduce everybody to the Angeles investors and Straight Out Capital Charlas. And I am so excited. I couldn't be any more excited to be with this group of incredible, amazing Latina venture capitalists, and led by our fearless host, Ines Ferre. And if I were to tell you our story, our original story, because we've been doing this for a little bit, about 2 years ago, I was in a conference and a Hispanic Heritage Foundation, and they were talking about how many Latina VCs were in the United States that had funds over 50 million and were leading those funds. And the number was 5. And I was horrified and surprised. I remember turning over to the person next to me and saying 5%. And they were like, no, like as in five people. And it really struck me because I knew already, obviously, that there was an underrepresentation issue, but I didn't realize that there was so much opportunity. And not only that, but I also realized that it was part of all our responsibilities not to only show to other potential investors and entrepreneurs, but people that are interested in entering into venture capital. How do we make it into venture capital? How do we get here? What do we think about the future of venture capital and why anybody could really become a venture capitalist? Our paths, you will find out, are very different. Everybody came from a very different place, but what we have in common is a lot of hard work and a desire to elevate each other. And so this group of women, about, I would say like 6 months ago, we've been really focusing on elevating each other. So whenever, Nurme just opened her new fund, anything that we have that is an accomplishment, we try to elevate each other because it is such an important piece to have enough visibility and to show and demonstrate other interested parties that, yes, there is another side of venture capital. There are some of us working over here, and we welcome and are super excited to have even more of us moving across and continuing to grow in our funds and in our representation in venture capital. And so without further ado, I am super excited about introducing you to our panelists today. And they're going to spend just a couple of minutes, sharing their name, their fund, a little bit about their background, and then I will kick it over to Ines, who will be, doing the official charla with our panelists. After that, we're going to have a Q&A, but you could always use the chat to share your questions. So as soon as they come up, just write them in the chat. That works as well. And then towards the end, Bernadette Aulestia will help us with the closing and the adjournment. So please ask all your questions, connect with any and all of us in LinkedIn. We're here to help you. We're here to elevate you and to support you in your path and your growth wherever you are. And so without further ado, why don't we start with Carolina Huaranca. Carolina, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with these incredible women on this panel. My name is Carolina Huaranca Mendoza. I'm currently a scout for Lightspeed Venture Partners, which is a multi-stage venture fund with a few billion of assets under management. And my focus is identifying very early pre-seed and seed companies to invest in, mostly in the US and a little bit in LATAM. The most important thing that you should know from me on the personal front is I'm a kid of immigrants, first in my family to finish college here in the US. And there is no traditional path, as Lisa mentioned, to starting in ventures. I literally cleaned homes and then went into investment banking and left and ended up starting a company that completely failed. And now I'm on the other side of the table. So there is no one way to get to where we are. There are so many different paths to get to this place.
I love it. I love it. I always have loved your story, Carolina. So thank you for sharing that with us. All right, now Carmen Palafox, if you want to go ahead and share a little bit of your background and your fund.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carmen Palafox, and I launched 2045 Ventures in October of 2020. I'm based in Los Angeles. I invest at the very early stage, pre-seed and seed. 2045 is a thesis-driven fund. The thesis is that diverse teams outperform, which is backed by a lot of studies from McKinsey, BCG that show that diverse founding teams outperform non-diverse teams, and I am very bullish on certain themes and verticals, including climate tech, fintech, and health tech.
I love, by the way, the painting behind you with the mixed hands. And congratulations on launching the fund. That is such a huge, scary, and amazing moment. Congratulations for that. All right, then we have Consuelo Valverde. Consuelo, do you want to share a little bit about you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Consuelo. I'm originally from Mexico. I moved to San Francisco almost 16 years ago. I am now a US citizen also. I'm a daughter of an immigrant dad that moved from Cuba to Mexico when he was 14 years old. He worked and slept under the counter, working really hard, learned how to work when he was 14 years old. So I'm the first also person in my family to go to college. I graduated from the University of Miami. I am the founder of SB Latam Capital. I founded the firm in 2013 here in San Francisco to invest in science and technology-enabled startups to transform environment, societies, and health on a global scale. We have themes across these three pillars. We see Latin America as one of three things. It's either the market, the talent, or the partnerships. We're currently in our second fund. We did 13 investments with our first one. And currently we have almost 10 companies in our portfolio of our second fund. And well, I'm an electrical engineer. I have 2 masters in science, including computer science and science entrepreneurship. And I'm very glad to be here with these amazing women.
Thank you, Consuelo. All right, Norma Cadena, we'll go with you.
Yeah, I love it. We're going to finish here with 3 engineers. Norma, based in Los Angeles. I was born in Mexico, grew up here in Los Angeles, was one of the lucky kids to have been tapped on the shoulder and introduced to engineering at a time where I remember saying, what the heck is that? And I spent my first decade or so in the aerospace sector and have been in venture for the last 6 years. Last year, I launched a firm called Supply Chain Capital, and we're investing at the intersection of food, culture, and tech. Great to be here.
I love it. All right, and last but not least, Samara Mejia, do you want to share a little bit about your background?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Samara Mejia Hernandez, and I'm a founding partner of Chingona Ventures. Chingona invests in badass founders at the earliest stages. I launched the fund in April of 2019. I've made now 23 investments in 23 months, so very busy. But similar to everyone else, I am an immigrant to this country. I was born in Mexico. I'm a daughter of migrant farm workers and also orphans. And, you know, I grew up in a low-income, low-income, multicultural household. So that's the lens I always brought to my investing style.
And that's just a little bit of all of the various paths that have led this group to venture capital. So that's just like touching the little surface. I can't wait to see what Ines takes us further. And without further ado, Ines, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. So happy to be here and so happy to hear from our panelists. Let's dig into our questions. First off, this urgency behind Latinas and VC. Why now, do you think? Samara, let's start with you.
Well, the way I think about it is Latinos are one of the fastest growing demographics in the United States, right? 1 in every 4 kids born today is Latino. Latinas in particular are getting higher education, higher degrees than ever before. And we're often the most overlooked group. We get paid the least out of any other group, you know, even including women. And so for me, I'm just like, okay, we're getting more degrees, we're growing in terms of our household income, and yet we are not being invested in, both from a founder's perspective as well as a fund manager's perspective. So for me, first and foremost, it's the most overlooked opportunity in the market that is completely obvious. And many of us, right, are building theses around that, or even if our thesis is not around that, our network and our experiences give us a unique and competitive edge to see deals that others might overlook.
And Nora May, what are your thoughts on this?
You know, what we've seen through venture over the last couple of years is that women of color in particular are founding the highest number of companies, and yet they're the least funded. So when we think about venture in particular, venture is where we say, here's a check because we consider your company to have this huge economic growth potential and a demonstrated ability to bring returns. And so when we think about who is allocating funding and who is getting funding, that's a big mismatch. And we have an opportunity to come in. Research has shown that who is on the opposite side of the table really matters. We've seen this in traditional banking. And so we need to bring this change to venture, right? I think 2020 was a big year for women in politics, where women showed up with donations, raising, running for office and winning office. And I really think that 2021 is a big inflection point for women in venture capital.
And Carmen, what do you think of this mismatch between who is allocating funding and who is getting funding?
Right. So, specifically in Los Angeles, 45% of the population is Latinx, but only 6% of VC dollars goes to Latinx founders. So it's a big opportunity gap. And when you think about California as being one of the 5 states that doesn't have a racial majority, where our university system is multicultural, there's a big opportunity, not just now, but in the coming years.
And I'm wondering also what this journey has been like for you all, especially when it comes to credibility in the VC area. What has your journey been like? What have some of the challenges been? Consuelo, let's start with you.
Hi, yes, I just remember when, December 2012, and I thought it was the time to start a venture firm. And I had my first pitch with a Mexican potential investor, mainly to get his feedback. And everything else that happened after that. So imagine I was the first woman in Mexico that founded a firm that was pitching venture capital, and then science. And I think it just couldn't be harder. And it was really hard. First of all, I got a lot of comments at the beginning, there's no way you will be able to launch a firm as a solo founder. So you need a partner, and it has to be a man, it has to be a guy, but ideally not Latino, and I went out like speed dating, desperate to get a partner, looking, for that ideal partner, supposedly. And it was really hard. So that was the first barrier. And in so many conversations I got, you have no track record. It was really, really hard, up to a point that, even my husband one day was like, it's totally acceptable, if you decide to stop, you have been, persevering, and it's not about you necessarily, but sometimes it's okay, to do that. But if you want to continue as well, and I remember that day when I was on a car from Mexico City to my hometown Cuernavaca, and I was reading this book about venture capital. I don't even remember the name, but it said that 90% of the people that go out to raise a fund are not successful. And I was like, that was super motivating for me, because I was like, wow, it's not about me, it's just hard for everyone. Only 10% make it, so I'll be part of that 10%, So it was hard, and now raising fund 2, of course, it becomes easier. And we have been investing almost 2 years with the second fund, so definitely much easier. But even 3 years ago, I used to get questions from especially unsophisticated investors like, well, you don't have a track record, because you haven't had an exit. So I'm like, no, that's not how you define track record necessarily in venture. That's not the only way. But so definitely much easier now, but it has been a really, really hard job. I like running ultra marathons and Ironmans, and I'm like, this is like doing an Ironman and an ultra every single day of my life.
Yeah. Carolina, I'm wondering your thoughts on this. I mean, Consuelo was just talking about advice she had gotten early on, that she has to have a partner, preferably male, preferably not Latino. Who have been some of the people that have helped you out? And I'm just also wondering, are you all connected in some way? Are Latinas in VC, do they help each other out?
I'll start with the first one and then remind me on the second part for my short-term memory. So I will say, I'll preface this by saying when I think about my pathway into venture, there are two kind of barriers. One is that is a very personal mindset piece, and another one is on the professional front. So on the personal piece, I didn't even know at 25 or 26 what venture capital was. I didn't know what Silicon Valley was. So when I ended up years later out in the Valley, I came to tech as an operator and then a founder. And I landed at my fund as an entrepreneur in residence with no pretext of ever going into investing. And it wasn't until my former bosses, Mitch and Frida at Kapor, actually tried to convince me to go and consider venture capital as an option. So for me, it was getting over my own imposter syndrome of like, could I actually do this job after reading a lot of the statistics that are out there? And what does it mean to be an investor? So I think that's important to mention, this piece of my own barriers or limiting beliefs that I was putting in front of myself and kind of reframing what investing could look like. And for me, it was leaning into the fact that I was an operator and a founder, and that experience is valuable when you're coaching companies, because I've actually been through having my former co-founder leave me, closing a company down, and all those experiences are actually valuable into the experience of supporting and helping companies get to a bigger space. And in terms of support, I think everyone here I have the pleasure and opportunity to meet. I will say Samara, there was one event that I did a keynote at. And this is like, I'll talk the personal front about what support means. And I remember I got off this event and I was all choked up. And the second text that I got was from Samara, just like saying, like, you're a chingona, you're a badass. So thank you, Samara. Consuelo, when I was crazy enough to say I wanted to do LATAM investing, and everyone kept telling me, there's no way you haven't deployed capital in LATAM. Consuelo was one of those first people to take the call and talk me through that. So when we say we support each other, it may not, for me, now that I've moved to New York, it's those little things that go a really long way, and things that you can say to people when you may not even know what's going on in their lives could really impact them in a positive way. So I want to say thank you to everyone here.
And speaking of some of the areas that you were looking to get into, let's talk about where are some of the opportunities for Latinas in VC. Samara, let's start with you.
Yeah. First of all, just to touch on what Caro said, I mean, I'm so grateful to have this community of Latinas. And right before this event, I was on a call with another Latina looking to launch her own fund. And it was just like, hey, can I pick up the phone and call you? Yes, we spent an hour talking about it. So I love this community that we're building. We're so small. In terms of areas of opportunity, you know, from I don't know if it's from an investing style or from, you know, areas to explore in VC, but I guess I'm going to take it from the investment perspective. And I'll talk about a company that many of us here are invested in, is called Suma Wealth. It's a financial platform for the Latino community. Beatriz Acevedo is the founder. She formerly founded Me Too. And that company grew. She knows how to engage audiences in a very unique way and grow them very, very quickly. She's had 30 plus years of experience doing this. But in fintech in particular, as I mentioned before, the numbers of where we are in terms of median income household growing, where we are in terms of degrees and different changes than we were from our parents. And so now we come with all this additional wealth, and it's like, what do we do with it? How do we think about it? How do we think about investing? And so Beatriz, when she left her last company, when she went to go launch this new company, she was thinking about it in a very different way of how do you grow and engage community while teaching them to do something, in this case, build multi-generational wealth, and that's through a couple different platforms. But what I was really so I'm really excited about the fintech world. 35% of my portfolio is in fintech, but particularly around democratization of financial education, and in this case, it's in the Latino community. I will say that 100% of our cap table was women. I think it was like 80 to 90% were Latinas, which is unheard of in venture capital. So, and these are groups of investors that were like, boom, I get it. It's not a niche market. It's not a, it's a growing market where you can have a venture backable and scalable business. And this person, the CEO, uniquely understands this market better than anybody else.
And Norma, where do you see opportunities, and also what benefits do you think that you may have realized for yourself and also other Latinas in BC?
Yeah, first of all, I think every industry is open to innovation by a Latina on the investment side of the table. For me, particularly, I'm moving from a broad approach to hardware, supply chain, manufacturing, and logistics to really looking at one sector and how it impacts the food system. So I find opportunity in combining the demographic shift in the U.S. with the better for you food movement, an interest in sustainability, and a focus around diverse founders. And so my partner and I are really focused on brands that have cultural appeal, maybe a by and for the community type of food or brand or ingredient that has the potential for mass market appeal. We're looking deeply at sustainable ingredients, and this means new to the US foods, including nopales. We are talking to 2 entrepreneurs right now bringing nopal snacks to market. Truly incredible to be able to repurpose something that we all know I have on my forehead to a snack that is, better for us and sustainably grown. So for me, the opportunity is in food, sustainability, supply chain, and ensuring that the food we put in our body is healthier and better for the environment.
I'm also curious to know what kind of role or relationship is played between angel investors and your early funds. Consuelo?
Yes. So, we also invest as early as possible, writing the first check, so pre-seed, seed. So relationships with those early investors also are very important. I think my second investment in venture, I found out about it from a Kaufman fellow, a friend, Beto Payares, who all of you know very well, and other angel investors. So that is really, really important for us, for VCs. They have early access, especially if it's in another geography outside from where we are. So those collaborations are very important. It's difficult, for example, for us to access an opportunity directly in Chile. We don't have an office in South America. So it's typically from angel investors that we hear about those opportunities. They tend to be more focused on a specific vertical. It could be food tech. So we get to hear about it, directly much earlier. But it's definitely important.
And I'm wondering if some of you can share with us some of the balancing that goes on between returns and also a social good aspect of investing and investing in certain communities or reaching out to certain communities. Carmen, let's start with you.
Well, I don't think there is a balance necessarily. I think there's a massive opportunity gap that traditional venture capitalists simply haven't developed the infrastructure or the relationships to be able to really dive into and benefit from. So a lot of the companies that I've invested in, for example, I've met through different types of events like Latinx founder dinner or a women founder pitch competition. And so I don't think there is a balance there. I think in venture capital, there's tremendous upside. And so our goal as venture capitalists is to deliver returns and to be in that top performance quartile. So as a venture fund, we're looking to return, at least at the very earliest stages, 5x cash on cash return. And so we need to look for opportunities that can be billion-dollar companies.
And Carolina, I know that you have some background in this. What are your thoughts on this relationship between returns and impact?
So at the former fund that I was at, it was considered a social impact fund. And my personal philosophy is that every company has impact. Could it have negative impact on society, neutral impact, or positive impact? So our point of view is that we wanted to invest in companies that were having a positive impact on the world, while also, as Carmen mentioned, making, at least we are a top quartile fund, my old fund, on paper. And for us, it was always leading by the thesis, but not sacrificing the financial returns. But I think ultimately for me, I still, even though my mandate is not impact investing, I believe that every company has some type of impact on society. So I'm constantly, I wouldn't invest, for instance, in something like Jewel, even though it could have made me significant amounts of money. There are some platforms and marketplaces that are actually in the gig economy that are creating bad jobs. And I actually think people from my community are over-indexing and using them and are continuing to be and will be relegated to very low wage, non-skilled jobs for a significant amount of time. So it's a question that I ask myself consistently in how I invest and what my lens is on the world.
And let's talk a little bit about some of the lessons that have been learned being in this VC space. And would you ever go back to where you were before, perhaps outside the VC space, to what you were doing before? Norma?
Yeah, lessons. You know, I recently interviewed with the team at Sloan, at MIT Sloan, where I actually met my business partner 12 years ago. And one of the lessons that I think I learned then that applies within venture is around the fact that we can all win, right? So oftentimes in venture, people talk about competing deals and winning allocations and deals. And I think particularly in our community, we're finding more and more opportunities to be collaborative and opportunities to trade and barter and support each other and bring value. I think that continues to be the biggest lesson for me. It is not a one winner take all. And another lesson is around the importance of balancing the numbers, the outlook, the financial model with like the really simple, neutral, gut, impact, integrity, like all the stuff that makes us like feel warm and fuzzy and excited about coming to work. And so I think oftentimes we feel like we're in this cutthroat environment and we have to be this persona that is loud and mean and firm and, you know, demanding and pounding the table. And really, I've learned that your ability to bring your whole self to the table, to the meeting, is crucial in having a job that is fulfilling and also to reaching the right type of investor and the right type of founder. Those are my two takeaways.
Some interesting points that you bring up, Nara, that we can all win and going by gut and going by integrity. Consuela, I'm just wondering your thoughts on this. Can we all win, and do you all go by gut and integrity rather than just the number crunching? I mean, what is the balance there?
I think I learned early on in Mexico, particularly I got a very good lesson when I moved back from the US after college to Mexico, and I had to go to Pan Am Cargo. So I'm dating myself. I graduated when I was 20 from college. So I had to pick up my, all my luggage and my things. And I saw the bribes happening under the table, with the custom brokers and everything. And everybody was leaving. And we were the ones that were there for 8 hours and it was because we never bribed anyone. So I learned that, I think at that moment, getting back to Mexico, I was like, it is important, to be successful and to have because of what you want to achieve. But for me, it's not about making money, and it's also important how you create value in society. So there are many easy ways to make money, and many more easier than others. But for me, it does matter, what you're doing and how you do it. So in that sense, integrity is critical. Your values are very important. I think it's what Nora May was saying about win-win. I just cannot see venture in a different way. I even if I try, because it's a long-term, 10 years. So if you try to take advantage or do a transaction that's in your own benefit, you will pay for it in the next round or with the founders or in so many ways. So I just cannot see how it's not a win-win. I think that's the way we do it. And in terms of the gut, we use a framework that frames our intuition for our decision making, our investment process. So that's critical. I think intuition is important, but when you're starting, I remember, the very first investments, like a VC told me, oh, it takes $20 million to form a VC. I'm like, well, I cannot afford that. As a Latina, there's no way I'm going to go out and say, I learned after I just lost $20 million or whatever,
And what keeps you all coming back to the VC world, Samara?
Look, I love this. I mean, I think we all do, right? It's and you have to. When we talk about all the good stuff and you see on the news, like all these funds being raised and all these exits and the whole thing. And what a lot of people don't tell you is, especially when you raise your own fund, I mean, many times you have to go without a salary for 2 years while you're fundraising. Many times you have to put up the GP commit, and that's typically 1% to 2% of the fund. And that's something that you have to take out as far as a loan many times, right? Sometimes you don't get that raised, or you don't get as much, as much as you wanted to be able to pay yourself a living salary. And so even after you raise, you can't pay yourself something. Or right, and then once you do, then you start investing, and that takes 5 to 10 years to get a return. So you don't even know if you're doing well and you're investing for that long. I like to say all those things because I still want to do it every single day. I wake up every morning at 4 a.m. and I want to do this, and I talk to founders and I love that, I'm the first text first call for them to be like, hey, I'm having this problem, I'm having this issue, or I'm not having an issue, I just got a huge, commitment from this incredible VC. And so for me, it's the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. But it's not for everyone. And I know a lot of people are out, like, it's the VC is the thing to do now, and people are raising funds and things like that. But not everyone, might be a good fit for it or might enjoy it. And also not every founder needs to take VC money. So I oftentimes when people say, do I want to get, should I get into VC? We talk about, both sides, the pros and cons. And there's a lot of other jobs that you can make a lot more money in. And then I talk about obviously the great things that we have about VC. So what keeps me coming back is being able to create my own fund, my own thesis, be able to invest in the founders that I believe in, and where I see this overlooked opportunity, be able to invest with these beautiful, wonderful, intelligent Latinas and other, investors that are building alongside me. And so that's what keeps me coming back.
And Samara, you bring up some good points about challenges as well earlier in what you were saying. Is it not getting paid for a couple of years? Is it the challenge that Consuelo brought up earlier, $20 million for start a fund? I mean, what are some of the challenges for Latinas entering the VC area? Carmen?
There's many. There's systemic barriers, absolutely. But I think the opportunity gap is really, really big. And so I think some of the challenges is that, there's traditional limited partners that invest in funds, and a lot of those limited partners have very deep pipelines. of opportunities to invest in funds that they've spent years establishing relationships with. So I think in order for us to succeed, we also need to have new limited partners begin to start investing and backing each and every one of us so that we can then create change in this marketplace. And I'm optimistic about that. I'm seeing different types of institutional investors like foundations start to align their missions with their investment strategies, and that's a big opportunity for all of us. But I think on the limited partner investor side, just having one Latina in your portfolio is simply not enough. I think that we can all be funded and there will still be more opportunity there.
Carolina, what do you think? How do you get more than one Latina in your portfolio?
Gosh. So I'll tackle this. There are, I guess, two issues here when we're thinking about breaking into venture. There is starting your own fund, which I think Samara and Carmen are honing in on, and there is actually working for a fund. So I'll start with the starting your own fund. So I was, not only did I invest in companies, but I also invested in funds as an LP. And I think I saw all of you. One of the challenges for me in how I wanted to invest sometimes was in the thesis that I had in how I wanted to invest did not always line up with a thesis on how the people's money who I was investing had a different perspective on the view on the world, on how they wanted to invest. And I realized, to Carmen's point, there need to be not only, in order to change this entire ecosystem, there need to be more people going into venture. There need to be all of us to start funds. And then there also need to be people who are limited partners, because all these VC funds, all they do is they just raise money from endowments, really rich people, and then they deploy capital. And the reality is there is a massive racial wealth gap that no one really talks about in this industry. And I think Samara touched on it, that if Latinas are already making less than 52 cents on the dollar and compare it to a white guy, think about how difficult it's going to be in order to do that. In some cases, I've seen people do 10% of the total amount raised, right? And if you have an LP that's very traditional, checking off the list and saying, oh, that person has more skin in the game, without having the context of realizing the disparity that persists in these systemic issues, they're going to make decisions that are flawed. So it's not publicly announced yet, but I'm going to be doing some LP investing to hopefully disrupt this again. So all of us, I think, will be connecting on that side. It's not public yet, but it will be in a few weeks, hopefully. But that is one thing. And then building pipeline of venture talent. There's so much genius in our community. I cannot continue to say how much genius there is. Listen, I'm a kid who cleaned homes and I'm on the other side of the table, right? And if all of us build out fellowship programs or intern programs. I know Samara has one. I know a lot of the Latinx VC is also building out pipeline. There are so many opportunities for more of our young people to break into this industry. But what really needs to happen is we need to create our funds so we create wealth in our own communities and we hire who we want and invest in who we want. So I stay in this game because I want to invest in companies that are going to build the world that I want my children to live in and my family to live in. And I continue to want to support this community because we are the future.
Wow. Norme, before we get to just to follow up on that, I just want to tell the audience that we have about 10 or 15 minutes until we get to your questions. So definitely send in your questions to us for any of the panelists or all of the panelists here. Norme, how do we tackle this issue of the wealth disparity issue that Carolina was just talking about, and also building out that pipeline?
Oh my gosh, I get the hard question. Just kidding. I think we're all tackling this racial wealth gap through our investments. Where I see opportunity, Ines, is in Latinos entering the VC landscape increasingly as LPs, right? I'm a first gen college grad. I was a teen mom. I love hearing Carolina say, you know, I cleaned homes and I'm on the opposite end of the table. I like to say I had a baby at 17 and I'm, you know, still doing awesome things. But Latinos are building wealth now in their professional careers. They are running small businesses. They're building wealth through real estate. And venture has been this black box for so many Latinos in our community. And so I know that through Latinx VC, we continue to make inroads here. And there are so many other platforms helping present this early stage investment opportunity and even the fund opportunity to Latinos, right? We have Pipeline Angels, we have Angeles investors, we have the Portfolio platform, Republic. I mean, take a look at what has happened with Backstage Capital in the last week. Pretty impressive. So I think that's an area of focus where Latinx VC and my work with Samara and Carmen here in this group in particular is focused, right? How do we get more Latinos to see this as an opportunity to do impact work, to yield returns, to support economic development in our communities, and expand their own prospects for wealth building? That's an area where I'm super excited to focus.
And I'm curious also as to the promise that you all see for the next generation of Latinas in VC down the line. And also, what piece of advice would you give any Latina that's thinking of entering this VC world? Consuelo?
Well, I think, well, to do what you believe in and not to let anything or anyone stop you in what you want to achieve. You know, there are always barriers, but sometimes I like to think that the barriers can be the way, actually. You know, so whenever you have an obstacle, how can you turn that into an opportunity? Like when I got out of college, I wanted to work as an electronic engineer in Mexico, and the job postings in the newspaper were looking for, you know, electrical or electronic engineer, gender male, age 25 years and older, and I didn't fit any of those criteria. I went to the interviews, I didn't get a job, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I had to create my own job for myself, and that's how I became a tech entrepreneur, and I founded my first tech company. You know? So and that changed my entire path. So that's the advice I would give.
So you really turned a negative into a positive. Carmen, what piece of advice would you give to Latinas looking to enter the VC world, and what kind of promise do you see for this next generation of Latinas coming in?
Well, you know, I think that just I wanted to circle back to your previous question with respect to venture capital investing, because I think it's incredibly important. You know, I think one of the issues is access. So for many of us, when we think about investment opportunities, typically venture capital isn't an option that's available. Venture capital is restricted to accredited investors, and it's a private placement. And so you actually need to have the opportunity to be able to invest in this asset class. And there isn't a lot of information or education around it. I think the National Venture Capital Association, if you go on their website, does a great job of providing information on this asset class. And I think that, you know, as investors, when we think about risk reward, venture capital has tremendous upside to create that wealth. So I think making sure that as a community, we're educating ourselves on this asset class and how to gain access to invest in it is important.
And Samara, what do you think about this educating the investment community about this? How do we do that? And also, what kind of advice would you give a Latina getting into the VC space?
Yeah, I'll start with the advice because it's pretty simple. Just do it. So I know it sounds kind of, simple, but look, when I started in venture, I didn't even, to Carmen's point, didn't even know what venture, like if I could do it. It was almost by an accident that I started at an internship. And then this was when it was not sexy to be in venture. And so I was like, great, I want to be in venture. There were no jobs posted. And I was just like, let me just find it because I really enjoy working with early stage companies. I worked on the public side. I want to work on the private side. And if I would have known how hard it was to get in, if I would have known that, X percentage of Latinas, even less at the time, were in VC, I probably wouldn't have done it. And I talked to so many Latinas that are looking to get into venture or looking to start their own funds. And the biggest thing is like two things. One is risk. They're coming from, they have a lot of loans. They come from a family where you don't have a cushion, and they're like, I need to take care of my family. I need to go back to school after getting my MBA program because I need my company to pay for my MBA because I'm going to go into more debt. And I'm constantly trying to encourage Latinas to take on more risk. It's not a blind risk, it's calculated risk, right? And I talk through how I did it. It's not for everyone, like we said before, but if you really want to do it, there's ways to do it. And many times you only need one person. You only need one person to give you an internship. You only need one LP to be your anchor LP, right? And find that person. You're going to get no millions and millions of times, but find that one person that's going to take a chance on you, that's going to say yes to you. And I promise you, that's going to help catalyze your career. That's going to help catalyze your fund. And so that's what I would say, just do it. In terms of education, there's so many more resources now. There's Latinx VCs, there's VC Familia, there's a lot of other resources. But the thing I always tell aspiring VCs is do the job before you actually do it. And there's so many more resources now. So for instance, if you were a VC, what would you do? You would go out and find companies. You would go out and actually invest in companies. I realize that not everyone has a 5K or 10K check to invest in, but if you do, great, right? Start writing a check. If you can't do 10K checks, there are crowdfunding platforms like Republic where you can go on and say, I can invest as little as $100 and write your own investment memo and say, all right, this is the thesis I have. I'm investing in consumer products led by Latinas. Let's say that's your thesis. Go to Republic, go to some other sites and just say, which companies would I have invested in? Why? And then start building a portfolio around it. And even if you can't even put $100 in, just start building a virtual portfolio around it and see and track how your companies have done, because that's what you would do as a VC. And you can now go to VCs and say, all right, I've done the work, I'm doing the work already. Here's my perspective on a thesis. And you will be 90% better than many of the inbounds that we get. So again, just do it. You only need one person and do the job before you actually do it.
Carolina, do you subscribe to the just do it? Is that what you tell Latinas in VC?
Yes, I subscribe. Not in those, much more eloquent than I would be, Samara. But I think being able to lean in and remember that we all have superpowers and walk into your genius. I think, like I said, I started with saying that I had my own limiting beliefs. So when I talk to young women, I talk about and show my vulnerability on the things that I did so much wrong. And a lot of when I was, debating on venture, I literally had someone push me and said, of course you can do this job. This job is not rocket science. None of it is rocket science. But I wanna piggyback off something Samara said. So there are so many ways to show that you have qualities of a good investor, right? So much online material, but you could also advise. So if some people aren't that liquid, but you're an operator at a company, there's so much value if you're like a growth marketer or doing community or a product manager, and you can connect even with people on Twitter. Like I will say, like I made some of my best relationships on Twitter of random people that I just, well, not random, but like intentionally that I looked up to, but I didn't have any connection or network to them. And I think that's another thing I will tell young people, or what I would have told myself, like put yourself out there. The worst thing that people can say is no. And you started out exactly where you were in the beginning, right? So the reason that I ended up at my old job as an entrepreneur in residence is because I cold emailed my boss. And they took the email and said, hey, I'm going to have a meeting with you this week. I lived in New York. I lied and said, of course I'll be there. I'm in San Francisco, which was total bullshit. And I showed up and I had an hour and a half conversation, and whatever it is, I created an opportunity for myself and they created a job. So those things can happen. You just have to be in the mindset to believe that you can create these things.
Those are great stories. Nora Mae, what's your piece of advice? Do you have those sort of nugget moments of cold emailing a boss or some way that you can sort of give advice to someone that's looking to enter the VC space?
Well, I wanted to share my sort of aha moment, right? I left my cushy aerospace job where it was also not rocket science. And my parents, who have worked factory jobs all their lives, thought I was nuts, right? For leaving my stable job with health insurance. And for me, it was so important to be, for the first time, in a position to be betting on myself. When I graduated college, I really wanted to be a consultant, but I couldn't. I had this 5-year-old kid. When I graduated from business school, there were things I wanted to do and I couldn't because I needed to help my parents financially. And so for me, making that really difficult transition was part of me learning to invest in myself, and having learned over the last decade of being in the workplace that I was smart and I had something to provide that was of value, and that I could, yield something greater for myself than I ever would working a 9-to-5 job. So this was 2015. There were probably less than 10 Latinas in venture at the partner level. I remember someone introduced me to Carmen, and we had a coffee date. And she had, been in the entrepreneurial space for a while. And she said, like, look at my nails. Like, this is such a big sacrifice. I had to stop doing my nails. And it's such a simple share, but for me, it was representative of what building this kind of, community would be. And so all of that to say that my advice for any Latina looking to be where we are is to make the rounds, right? To get to know all of us and our stories, tap into our resources and our network, and be the beneficiary of everything that we have learned as we make our way through this industry.
And speaking of community, let's get to some of the questions from the audience that they may have for this group of panelists. So any questions that want to come in, let's look at this first one that says, how can we as individual investors support the community while ensuring appropriate due diligence is carried out? Who wants to take that one on? Consuelo, how about you?
Well, we have a very structured process. I mean, we're also driven by our principles and values of the firm. And one of the very important things we do is to remove any biases, that we have. We have professional background biases, gender biases. So the framework we use, decision analysis, allows us to do that. So that's the way we also carry most of our due diligence. So I think this having a process that you carefully assess for particularly the biases you have, I think it's a very good way to do this. Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the next one that's up here from one of our audience members. Would you recommend becoming an angel investor first before investing in a VC or even creating a fund? Carmen?
I did start as an angel investor because I wanted to develop my thesis. And my first investment was into what is now known as Arcus. And my thesis back then, I think 2011, 2012, was on the power of diverse founding teams and underrepresented founders. And I really liked the technology that they were building. It was a cross-border payment system, and I saw a lot of value in it. So for me, it was definitely a learning opportunity to develop my thesis, to understand the process. But I don't think it's necessary before becoming a venture capitalist. It really depends on many different factors. It depends on how much disposable income you have, what your asset allocation is to different asset classes, and ultimately what your motivation is. So if you're looking to gain significant returns, then and you don't have a lot of time because you are doing several different things, then potentially you do consider investing in a fund. I would draw a parallel from investing in a mutual fund where you get exposure to a lot of different companies to investing in one stock.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, there's no order of events that need to happen for you to become a good angel investor, a good VC, right? And you can actually do it in parallel. So I've seen a lot of people do angel investing while also investing in funds to get exposure, to learn, many times they'll have co-investing opportunities, or sometimes they'll bring you in on some deals where you can say, all right, maybe I have an expertise, call it in healthcare, and I'm going to make individual investments in healthcare. But I'm curious about this fintech side, and this fund does a lot of fintech investing. So while I'm, an expert in healthcare and I'm learning that, and I can make investments as I choose, I can also learn how a VC fund works. And I just want to make that distinction too, because as an angel investor, it's your money. So if you like how a founder, their thesis, and you just get along with them, you can make an investment, right? It's like you don't have to report to anybody. You don't have to give returns to anybody but yourself. When you are a VC, you are managing people's money. You raise money on a thesis. There's a certain level of expectations in terms of returns. And so I can like a founder and how we communicate, but if it's not on thesis, if the valuation is too high for where I target, if I can't get a certain return, I can't make that investment, right? And so it's a different thing. But so what I would encourage is just say, hey, if I want to explore this and I can have the income too, you can write your own checks. You can invest through a VC fund. You can work with Angeles. I'm an advisor to Angeles as well. So pitch for them there, in that you can come in, you can talk about the thesis. I often talk on the WhatsApp chat groups, and I just share how I think about a company. I share my diligence, and it's a way for you to learn how to invest and get more comfortable with it, so that you could eventually run your own fund at some point, or you can, be more bullish on your personal investments.
Yeah, on that angle, I also, one of the things I heard early on when I was raising Fund 1 was that I should first be an angel investor. I should first have my own portfolio and then build my famous track record, and then they will be writing checks, LPs. And I didn't do that. And when it got really hard, I was thinking, wow, maybe I should have done that. When it got very hard, the fundraising of the fund. However, I did my very first angel investment, not because someone told me, but I really believed in that company, which later on became the first investment also of Fund 1. And that became like a really good return. Till today, I have, and I haven't exited from that investment, 3,500% return on my very first investment. Not because someone told me that was the way to do it. It was just a conviction for the entrepreneurs. And like everyone said, it was my money. It was a super small ticket, and it has become very significant. So I think even if you don't have enough, financial resources, there's a way to do it. But it's not because someone else is telling you, oh, that's the way you have to do. Like Samara was saying, there's not a clear path. I have seen many of the opportunities in my life have been from being a contrarian, so maybe that's also part of my own nature, but there's not a written path that you have to follow. But I think also you don't need to have millions of dollars. You can do it also with some of your savings.
And I was wondering that, I mean, how much do you all think that is the minimum or enough? How much do you start with?
Well, that investment in particular was around $10,000, $15,000. You know, that was. I had a strong conviction for the company, so I just did that. Yeah.
Good for you.
Really worth it.
Good for you. Okay, let's get to some more questions that we may have here on queue. Just many of the panelists talked about overcoming their limiting beliefs. Can you describe strategies or tactics you use to overcome those limiting beliefs? Oh, this is really interesting. So what are some of the strategies or tactics that you used to overcome limiting beliefs? Carmen?
I think for me, it's about having a strong support system. I honestly didn't have limiting beliefs coming into this, right? So graduating from Berkeley Haas, where I got my MBA, that was back in 2015. And at that point, I wanted to start a fund for underrepresented founders. And if I had known then how hard it was going to be, I probably wouldn't have done it. So I think for me, I just did it, like Samara said, and got into it, and quickly learned that others had limiting beliefs for me. And the way I overcome those is by having a very strong support system. So my mother, who still believes that I, walk on water, my husband, who, supports me and just continuously raises me up. And so I think having that support system is critically important, because although I don't have limiting beliefs, there's still a lot of challenges that I face.
Norma, what about you? Did you have limiting beliefs, and how did you overcome those? What were some of the tactics that you used?
Yeah, I still do, Ines. I still have them every week. My partner and I, we'll call each other and say, I'm still questioning my life choices. I don't know about you. And for me, I find that the longer I'm spending in this period of limbo that is difficult, the more that can intensify, right? I'm going on month 8 of no income for the first time in my life since I was 16. And so it's hard not to let that affect you. At least it is for me. And the way that I can turn my frown upside down, if you will, is by adding value. And so by picking up, one of those phone calls Samara alluded to, or responding to an email from a founder and finding those 30 minutes, 1 hour where I can brainstorm with them, make an introduction, add value, provide feedback, coach and support them, is the reminder to me that my voice and my presence matters in this industry, as difficult as it is. So all the time. And I get through it by reminding myself that I have something to offer that is deep and meaningful and will move the needle in the industry.
And Carolina, I know you've had an incredible journey that you've talked to us about. How were some of the ways that you were able to overcome limiting beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, I have limiting beliefs all the time. I went to 2 Ivy League universities, like every pedigree, like always like the #1 in everything. I still get them every day. And I will tell you, some of the best founders I've ever worked with have them too. And everyone's experience is different. But similar to Nora May, I think I try to find things that ground me. So I practice gratefulness and I journal. So I literally have a day like routine. So when I get up in the morning, I have to go work out. Now that I'm in New York, I'm like by a park and I run around the park. And then I write about all the things I'm grateful for. And I do something every morning to help somebody. could be a founder, it could be a friend, it could be something. And I remind myself of the things that I'm grateful for, even in the hardest of times. And I will tell you, I've lost several family members in COVID. I have an aunt right now who has, who's going into brain surgery. And if I didn't have that perspective, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So I try to like center myself on like every little thing that I should be grateful for, and try to give back. And give back.
Yeah, our condolences to you, and also hoping that your aunt has a speedy recovery. But certainly these are challenging times as well. And so I'm sure that many people have limiting beliefs, even just given this COVID era. Let's look at another question right now. How do you handle failure? I mean, if you invest in a company, you had a strong feeling about success and this doesn't happen, do you feel any regret? So how do you handle a failure, especially for companies that you thought in your gut, this is going to be a winner and it ends up not being? Samara?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that in particular, women, and there's a quote, right? It says, women are taught to be perfect, men are taught to be brave. And if, you know, in startup land and in VC land, it's like failure in some cultures or in some environments is celebrated. And in some others, it's not. And to other people's points around when I started in venture and I left a cushy job with health insurance, my dad was like, where are you going? What are you doing? High risk, you know, what are you investing in? And I just had to get comfortable with the fact that I was going to fail. And I don't use fail, I use it as learn. And there's many times now, and even recently, where I was like, oh my gosh, shit. Oops, sorry, I swear. But like, did this investment go to zero already? Like, what the heck is going on? And I freaked out about it. But then I realized, I'm like, okay, 99% of all VC investors fail at some point, right? This is a high risk, high return business. And so getting comfortable with it and saying, all right, yes, this happened. What did I learn? What did I know at the time of investment that I overlooked or that I didn't see? How do I change my diligence process? How do I think about this in the future? And many times, right, people that have money or that are able to will raise a friends and family fund round, right? If you have like $1 million, they'll put it in, you can make a bunch of checks and then learn from it and then use that track record and use those learnings to raise a fund from other people. Well, for us, many times we don't have that, or we have to raise from institutional investors because many of us don't have high net worth individuals in our network. And so that is a very daunting thing. But for me, it's one, being comfortable with that you're going to fail and you're going to make mistakes, but saying, I am making the best decision for me today with all the information I have. Two, realizing that most VCs fail, right? It's pretty common. And then three, like, what did I learn from that investment? And the last thing I will say about that is, like, if you're not assume that these investments, by the way, are high risk, high return. So I wouldn't advise you, not that I have a license to anymore, but I wouldn't advise you to put 100% of your wealth into this. Set wealth aside to say, okay, I expect to lose this, right? And there's a high probability that you will lose it, but it's a small percentage of it, and be able to make, you know, high risk investments off of it.
And Samara, you bring up this high risk, high return and a failure and learning from that. And I'm just wondering if there's a sort of also adrenaline that comes with this, of being in a high risk industry and potentially high return, but at the same time, at the flip of a coin, it could be something that is maybe a failure or something that you learn about. Carolina, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that's something I really thrive in. So I think similar to Samara, I started in investment banking. So for me, like, putting points on the board in venture is a way to kind of keep track of how I'm doing. But ultimately comes down to what my purpose is, right? And my purpose is ensuring that I fund companies that are going to make significant impact on the world, but also get capital in the hands of people that look like me. So when I remember that kind of keeps me centered in how I'm thinking about in investing and managing risk.
So I think in investing at the very earliest stages, there's often not that traction or track record as we invest in startup companies. And so we're relying a lot on the frameworks we do have and the diligence we do have, and assessing, you know, a founder for what is their motivation? Why are they doing this? Why are they putting themselves through that journey? And a lot of times we're looking for mission-driven founders. And for ourselves, when we invest, we're also looking at how can we add value? How can we help them break through the challenges? And so I think a lot of us, when we invest, we are taking that call in the middle of the night, as Samara said, from the founder, because we want to do everything to make sure that that company succeeds. And so if it fails, I can guarantee in all cases have done everything within our power to make sure that every card has been played. I think when it comes to raising a fund, there's a lot of rejection involved. One of the mantras I live by is that rejection is protection. And so often in many cases, if I am getting rejection, then it's not the right fit for me and I move on.
Let's take this next question that's coming in from our audience for our panelists. Can you talk about some successful exits you've been a part of and how that inspires you to keep investing in the Latinx community? Norma?
You know, I mentioned I started in venture in 2015, was part of a firm that made 22 investments. I've made 9 angel investments myself, and then 9 investments through Portfolio's Rising America Fund. We have yet to have an exit. So we have many companies that are growing and doing exceptionally well and on track to perform, but I don't have any exits I can speak to, so I'll defer to my colleagues.
All right, who else would want to take this one on? Samara, I know that you talked earlier about learning through failures, but is there anything that you want to add to this?
So I had my first exit last year. It was from my last fund that I was a part of. I brought in the deal, I led it, was on the board, and it got acquired. And it was the best performing for a certain time. And it was great to see that, because like Norma, I started in 2015 as well. And you know, you wait a long time just to see this. How that relates to the second part of the question of how does that help, or what inspires me about the Latino community. So I was on the board of that company, and I remember it was a non-diverse team, all white males. And I was on there, and I remember, you know, we were thinking about hiring, and I helped them hire their first woman on the team. So I was on the call with her. I did reference, like the whole thing, I helped bring her on. And then there was a point where I looked at the salaries, and she was getting paid the least out of anybody else, even people that were more junior than her. And she had no equity, and everybody else at the company had equity. And I was like, you have to explain this to me. What is going on? And look, I love these guys, but they were just like, she didn't ask for it. And it was a very simple, you know, honest answer. And I go, okay, well, is she doing a great job? Yes. Would you be upset if she left? Yes. Okay, well, this isn't market comp, and this is what market comp is. So let's get her to that point. And they did. And now, you know, that they got acquired, she has equity in the company and has been able to get much above what salary she got paid. And that's why for me, that insight was like, okay, I know that one, I need to have, I and others, other Latinas and women and minorities need to have a presence at the board. 2, it's okay for me to not invest in non-diverse teams. Many people think that that's the only thing I invest in, but you can have a power and you can have a voice in many different types of investments. And 3, what made me feel great when I did have that exit, it was like, okay, right? Like Carmen said, research after research shows that non-diverse teams outperform. And I'm like, okay, I helped them not only bring on their first woman, but they brought on more women and more minorities, and they were able to pay them what they deserved, and then ultimately create an exit that created this new wealth for these employees, these early employees, that included women and that included minorities. And so for me, I'm like, that's how we're going to change our industry. That's how we're going to create wealth. And in turn, those early employees can now be angel investors, can now start their own companies, can now invest in other companies, right? And this is how we're going to create structural change in our industry.
On that note, my first angel investment that I mentioned, I had the opportunity to exit early on, and I continue receiving emails, people wanting to buy the shares. I decided early on I didn't want to exit. I mean, all the way till the IPO that might happen soon. That's kind of my conviction for that company. I always thought, why would I sell, after, my first 2-3 years? And the founder told me, hey, Consuelo, because you need a track record, it will really help you with your fundraisers. I'm like, yeah, but how am I going to explain to my LPs, potential LPs later, that I decided to exit and leave money on the table when that investment was very risky at the beginning. It was one of the very, very first fintech startups in Mexico. And in the sense how we're helping also entrepreneurs, Latinos. So Adolfo Babatz, he's originally from Mexico, and he was working at PayPal here in Silicon Valley. He decided to move back to Mexico to launch PayClip. And and Vilash Povala, the co-founder, he became the founder of our first investment of the second fund, which is Oyster Financial. Samara touched on something really, really important. I think that it's our participation in boards. It's very important as Latinas, women, we have to be on boards. We bring such a different perspective in every single board I have participated. Like, you can see that you're just, we come with our backgrounds, with our experiences, and we can contribute a lot to companies with our diverse perspectives. So I think it is very important to start also talking about, our participation in boards in early stage VC-backed companies as well.
And Carolina, I know that you had some thoughts also on exit plans.
So just for level setting, I think most of us here are seed investors. So it typically takes, 7+ years to invest. And I don't think, at least for myself, I've been investing since 2015. So you got me on 6 years. But there is a company, I want to mention a company related to board. So we actually didn't take board seats at my old fund. And one of the things that one mentor gave me good guidance on is, just because your fund doesn't take board seats doesn't mean that you shouldn't be a board, sit on that board. So it was really interesting way to kind of reframe. And I was so helpful to that founder that he asked for me to sit on the board, and it was a forcing function for the fund to actually have that conversation. So the partner at the time took the board seat. I became the board observer, the only woman on the board. And for me, like to Samara's point, it was all this perspective that I was number one, there was a Latino co-founder, but there were issues that they weren't thinking about on gender, because I was the only woman on the team. And you would think, oh, wow, we're a community, but sometimes the voice of having a woman and a woman of color in the boardroom is really important. Boards are imperative for our community to continue to access wealth. So I, with a group of folks, worked on that AB 979 legislation to get racial and ethnic diversity on public California boards. And now with a group of friends are also working on getting more folks on public boards. So Lightspeed, for instance, is having an initiative on Latinx. So I expect all of you will be there at that event with me, and we can get the word out. But like now other funds are contacting me, like, who are the best operators you know? at these different funds to like take a board seat. And of course, I think it's imperative now that people are thinking about Latinos and Latinas, right? That is like the next part of the stack that we should be, putting collectively all of our organizations' efforts on.
And just looking forward in these next few minutes, as far as the opportunities that you've seen and the founders that you work with, what do you look for in that winning combination, that one that you say, this is going to be a winner? And any thoughts that you may have on the field of Latinas in venture capital? And what should they be looking for when they're going to fund companies?
I'll jump in real quick, if that's okay. So there's a company that I invested that everyone thought was a shitty company, excuse my language, and no one wanted to do it. And I had massive conviction because, and keep in mind, this was a founder, there was no data, it was concept. He had executed on a company previously. He was a failed founder. But what struck me was his perseverance and how deep he went into the problem. You can tell there's nuance in how someone can just talk about market, but can they talk about market in how valuable that problem is, and just like understand thoughtful, intentional nuances that blew me away. And then obviously I looked at what the potential market could be. It was in the security space. This is a company that I saw at seed. Sequoia did the A16 did the B, Graycroft did the C. It's on its way, hopefully, to be a unicorn. And it does good in the world. But literally every investor on the team was like, no way, like this is not going anywhere. Okay, Carolina, we'll let you put one through. And now that company is doing well when my old fund is pitching it. So this importance of being contrarian, but also really understanding the drive and motivation of the founder, especially if it's really early stage in its concept. What have they done in the past that shows you that they can execute on this? Are they a magnet for talent? Can they hire folks when they have no money and bring them on board to work with them? And then this idea of how nuanced they get into the problem, because you can tell, at least in my experience, this thought process on how he thinks the company was going to go. Like he had an answer and it was so thoughtful and everything. Even if he didn't know the answer, he's like, I don't know, but this is my hypothesis and this is how I'm thinking about it. And I think that's an important, this idea of thoughtfulness and intentionality and going deep in a problem is something I think often when I was an early investor, I missed.
And Norma, your closing thoughts on Latinas in VC and what you just have to look for in that winner.
Oh my gosh. So on Latinas in VC, it is our time. We've got to get loud. We've got to support each other. And I think 2021 is an inflection point. A couple thoughts on picking winning teams. Some themes and characteristics that really pop up for me are, founders' vision and ability to really envision this future. Being customer first and customer always, coachable and curious, and to have an ability to attract and retain talent. And often this is storytelling, this is passion, drive, it's hustle, it's grit. It's someone who really captivates you and makes you say, holy crap, I want to be in your car. I want to be on your boat. I want to go where you're going because it sounds freaking awesome.
Samara, your closing thoughts?
Just reiterate, just do it. We need more Latinas in venture. We need more Latinas investing. We need more Latinas on boards. And don't be afraid to do it. And you have a support system right here, and it's growing. So you leverage us as you go into this very risky but incredible world.
Carmen?
1 in 5 people in California is Latina. I think the time is now, and we need the Latino, Latinas in our community to support and back us.
And Consuelo, your closing thoughts on all this?
Turn any obstacles in the way to achieve your dreams.
Excellent, ladies. And now let's toss it over to Angeles Investors to close out on this.
Latinos are actually very responsible for the addition of new jobs in the American economy. However, access to capital to this group is extremely limited. We want to help change that. We want to make a difference both with our capital and make the private equity community aware of all that we have to offer and all of the opportunity that they're passing up on.
Our mission is to find, fund, and grow the most promising Latinx and Hispanic ventures. We want to make sure that Angeles Investors is a platform in where these companies not only do well from the business perspective, but also they shine. So we are very involved in building the next generation of Latinx and Hispanics entrepreneurs.